Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. This is our third installment of our workplace continuity series, where we are examining issues related to COVID-19 around practical steps for reentry, all the way through reimagination of a new workplace. And today we're really excited to take a deeper dive into strategies for reactivating space. And we're going to hear some of our latest research insights affecting reentry and work from home, as well as talk about specifically how we're helping our clients reactivate their space and start the transition to reentry. So with that, I will turn it over to Peter Miskovich to get us started. Peter, go ahead.
Christine, thank you so much. Great to be with everyone today. What we have up on the slide at the moment is our client experience journey map, which we've developed over the last several months. We've shared on our previous workplace continuity webinars. And the client experience journey begins with the first phase on the far left of shock and realization and response to the COVID-19 crisis. And now we're moving into the reentry and reactivation phase, and we're helping a number of clients with their resiliency planning, reactivation planning, and how to actually look at COVID as an accelerant to reimagine the workplace for the future. And so in today's session, Susan Wassman, who leads our global occupancy planning business, will be sharing leading practices in terms of reentry planning. And David Barnett, who leads our research group, will be sharing our experience around the world in terms of these leading practices and how our clients and how many organizations are looking at reentry and reactivation. So with that, Susan, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Peter. So originally, this webinar was supposed to cover our 2020 occupancy planning benchmarking report. We've been publishing this report for the last several years, as you can see, but during COVID, we really thought it would be more appropriate to focus on some of the reentry metrics we're seeing across the globe around COVID. Not to diminish our 2020 report, it will still be published, and you will be getting a link after this webinar with the report. But included in the report will be a section on COVID reentry, as well as our other normal topics that we cover every year, as space eligibility, allocation programs, as well as mobility programs and utilization technology. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David to walk us through some of the findings from our COVID survey, which we have polled all of our accounts in mid-April and mid-March.
Thanks, Susan. And as you said, we've tried, really to just engage our clients across the world and take a pulse survey, as you said, starting in April and going to May. And that represents 80 companies across 13 industries across Americas, APAC, and EMEA. And one of the key findings we saw really validated what we're seeing from a working from home aspect. And 77% of our organizations in mid-April said that they had at least 80% of their workforce working from home. And in May, that increased up to 79%. So again, that really validates that this is indeed one of the largest, if not the largest, work from home pilots conducted that we've seen. And there's some regional differences, as you'll see in that table on the right, but for the most part, a majority of us are working from home. And in addition to that, we've seen a change in leadership support in working from home. 46% of our respondents said that there's an increase in leadership support in April, and in May that went up to 57%, noting that there's an increased leadership support. And that goes beyond, the stay home mandate. It's really putting leadership behind working from home and starting to see that take hold as the pandemic continues. And because of how fluid the pandemic has been, we thought it would be great to poll everyone that's on this call as well and ask the same question. So what percentage of your workforce is working home today? And I'll give everyone a couple moments to submit their answers, and then we'll compare to what we've been seeing globally. All right, we're getting some in already. Okay, I know you can't see it on the screen yet, but I'll give it a couple moments and see how that's tracking.
Yeah, David, it's Peter. It's fascinating to see the 80% or more category. It was such a large majority. but we'll wait.
Yeah, it jumped off. Yeah, exactly. That jumped out right away. All right, great. I think we have enough answers in here, and we'll share what we found from everyone on the call. And as you can see right away, Peter, like you said, 80% or more really is dominating everything going right now. And this just, again, validates what we're seeing, what we've been hearing, what we've been seeing at headlines, what we've been seeing, working with clients. And I know that with this, we've all probably had some experiences or hiccups or challenges with working from home. Some organizations probably didn't have infrastructure in place prior to the pandemic, but it's also been a stress test for those that are trying to scale what they did have. But in terms of challenges, I think, I've seen some kids crawling around in the background on video conferences, dogs barking, a whole host of issues that, we're trying to get through. So Susan, can you kind of walk us through the challenges and the findings of the survey we found, what you've been hearing from clients, and how maybe some of these are opportunities for organizations to adapt?
Yeah, absolutely, David. So as we all know, I think we were all caught off guard a little when the orders came through to start working from home. And as you can see, when we polled our clients in mid-April, you can see some of the challenges here. Like David mentioned, in the Americas, very similar to EMEA, we struggled with, distractions at home. Could be family, pets, small children that were now not going to school, or physical accommodations to be able to work from home. But in APAC, they struggled more with slow internet or network access. And you can see across the globe, the highest was the slow internet access and bandwidth across all the regions. So what we saw is that organizations that had embraced a mobile concept pre-COVID were much more prepared to embrace this new normal while continuing to be productive. And as David said, we are currently undergoing the largest work from home pilot ever conducted. And we're hearing from many organizations that they are really shocked at the productivity of their teams and themselves. And they think this pilot might actually lead to more adoption of mobility programs, as well as, address how we reimagine the new normal to be. And so, as David mentioned before, we've also seen an increase in leadership support from working from home despite the challenges, which leads us to the next poll.
All right, so we wanted to ask you folks on the call, post-COVID-19, what level of interest does your company have in developing a mobility program? So you'll see if we have more interest, less interest, no change. We'll wait for some responses to come in, and then we'll show the results.
And David, it's Peter again. It's interesting to see one of the categories getting a great deal of response. So we'll let the survey results come in.
Especially how quickly, too, some of these responses came in, off the bat. Just, what individuals are doing, what their companies are doing is a pretty good sign.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we have enough to go off of. So let's go ahead and show what the results were for this question. And so the vast majority said there is more interest. Again, validating that leadership support Susan was referencing in our research and what we've been, speaking to in the clients we've been speaking to. And then we have about a quarter that said there's no change. Again, there's still, maybe some waiting or uncertainty organizations are trying to navigate through. But indeed, for the most part, it looks like there is more interest and might affect what that stickiness looks like for mobility programs and working from home. And I do know that, when we were talking about the challenges that we're facing, I know that some employees probably do like working from home. There's certain activities they think are more productive at. As Susan was saying, maybe they have a better sense of collaboration, connecting on video conferencing and other, chat methods. But I also know there's a really good amount of employees that are eager to go back into the office. And they're trying to ask their organizations, when are we going to do this? What is our timing looking like? So we knew that was a key insight of what we wanted to dive into on these pulse surveys. So we asked our organizations, what is their timing looking like? Have they set a reentry date? And on the left, you'll see at the global level, 58% have not set a reentry date. That is down from 80% in mid-April. So we really have seen some decisions being made when it comes to the timeline. And 33% have no plan at the time. And we have a quarter awaiting health official approval. 13% have started reentry. We have 9% targeting May, about a fifth targeting June and July. And that's at the global level, and there's definitely regional insights on this as well. If you look at APAC and EMEA, they're far ahead of the Americas when it comes to that reentry and how early they're starting. And if you look at the table on the right, there are some delays with the Americas. We had some folks saying, they're planning on shooting for May. That got pushed back to June. And there's also an increase of some uncertainty and having no plan in place, from 33% to 41% saying that they have no plan. So, this just really shows the dynamics at play here and the different impacts that the virus is having across regions, as well as that there is a real amount of uncertainty. And, for those organizations that have a portfolio across geographies and regions, this is really super important to look at in navigating through COVID-19. So again, we want to poll those on the call on this timing issue and ask you, what is your organization's current time frame for employees returning to the workplace? And again, we'll give you a couple moments and we'll show the results. So we have pretty mixed so far.
Yeah, this is Peter, and I'll just share that, from our various client engagements at present, we are seeing a great deal of C-suite dialogue and discussion and strategy evolution in terms of reentry dates and reentry percentages. So it's interesting, Susan and David, to see that this survey response from our audience is also representative, I think, of that diversity across the C-suite with our current COVID-19 engagements that are underway.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's a great point, definitely. And I think we're ready to share the results for those on the call. And, we have seen, we had about, I think the most said June 2020, about 23%. And after that, we saw a lot of folks with no plan at this time or too soon to determine. Again, we saw those regional differences, but again, this validates what Peter's saying, just the C-suite supporting the leadership shown on working from home and the time frames that we're seeing across regions, across organizations. And all this survey, information, our client engagements and who we've been working with has really helped us identify 3 key pillars when it comes to reentry. And so, Susan, can you kind of walk us through, what these 3 pillars are in specifically reactivating space and what that looks like?
Sure. So as we've talked, these 3 key pillars are all around, how do we re-enter and, make sure that employees are returning to work in a safe manner. So the first one is reactivate space. Really, I'm going to go into more detail about this, but this is, how do we bring people back into the office? What should their return look like? And what do we have to do, whether it's physical changes to the space or, some social distancing, rotational mapping? What do we have to do to get our space ready for them to return? Number 2, respect health and wellness. Obviously, during this time, employees are feeling very stressed about maybe coming back into the office. So whatever we can do around the health of our employees and communicating to them that is the most important, and working with different landlords and tenants and visitors to make sure as our employees enter the space, they feel that they're being taken care of and they feel safe and well entering the space. And then, third is revitalize property and workplace operations. What do we have to do ongoing to make sure that our properties and our workspaces are adhering to the guidelines that we set up in the Reactivate and monitor those guidelines, right? If in case there's another outbreak, what are we going to do in the workplace to deal with that? So shifting, so we asked our accounts, what strategies are you considering to deploy to prepare for reentry? You can see April or mid-April results are shown in red here, and mid-May are shown in black around what our accounts were doing to support their clients' reentry program. And as you can see, it spans the gamut of social distancing, phased re-entry. We are increasing cleaning schedules and providing employees more access to sanitation projects, temperature checking, rotational mapping, all the way to furniture reconfiguration. But I think the most important on this graph is, as you can see, the social distancing and planned re-entry support ranked the highest. It's on the left and had the largest surge from mid-April to mid-May. Social distancing, for example, went from 57% from mid-April to 93% as of mid-May, and that's increasing 36 percent points. And as a matter of fact, when we polled our folks, there was about 68% of our occupancy planning teams that were supporting clients were doing some kind of social distancing plans for our clients to support their reentry program. And I was shocked to, when we totaled the amount of square feet we did, we have right now done, and probably a little bit more at this point, done about 150 million square feet of social distancing plans. Also, phased reentry also jumped from 50% to 87% in the last 4 weeks, and which is obviously a 37% increase in points. And at the opposite end of the spectrum, not having a plan dropped by 33%. So again, you can see it's been 4 weeks, but there's been a lot of change in some of the areas that are really seeing an increase in attention, and then not having a plan being on the decreased end. So I think this was really great data. So what this does, this leads us into what we put together as our three-pronged approach to reactivating the space. So to be able to reactivate your space, the first thing you have to do is develop your occupancy reentry strategy. And what that might mean is, first of all, setting de-densification thresholds, understanding the CDC guidelines or the guidelines that are in your local market, and really interpreting those for your employees. You have to also identify any risk points, mapping the client's journey, the employee's journey through the day, right? How are they gonna commute into the office? How are they gonna get their coffee? Where are they gonna go to lunch? Are they gonna eat lunch at their desk? So that journey mapping is an extremely important piece of your re-entry strategy, so that employees feel safe as they re-enter the space and they know exactly what to expect, especially those first couple days and weeks of re-entry. And then, as always, communication and change management is so important, so that employees feel safe as they're re-entering the space. They feel that their organizations have taken every precaution to make sure that they're entering the space and they're going to be safe as they go into their workspace. Number two is establish guidelines and protocols. So I'm going to take you in a little more in depth into the social distancing plans and guidelines we've been doing, but establishing those floor plans and rotational schedules of people coming in. Some clients we're seeing are doing actual workspace adjustments. We've seen folks take chairs out of conference rooms to make sure there's not too many people in the conference room, and they're adhering to the social distancing protocols. We've seen actually even some folks take furniture out so that people can't sit at certain desks. And then the last one on this is supporting your mobile workforce. We know that not everybody is going to come in with phase one or even phase two. There are some people that might continue to work from home, and some maybe indefinitely. So what are we doing to support those people? You saw in an earlier slide what they're struggling with. What can we do to make sure that work from home workforce has what they need to continue to be productive and continue to feel connected with their organization? Number three is what do we do to monitor once we re-enter the space? We are coming upon a lot of re-entry dates. And what we're seeing, lots of folks are monitoring, they were monitoring utilization of people coming into the building. So that if they were setting certain percentages of people that could come into the building, they were tracking that in their utilization tracking methodology and technology, so that they made sure that they weren't, more people were not coming in based on their protocols that they've set. Some folks have also either created room reservation systems that could help them understand who's using which seat at what time. We even have reservation systems that could basically provide janitorial schedules for people as they come in and use a seat. That report at the end of the day is provided to the janitorial staff to make sure the cleaning is following all the protocols. Now I'm going to take you into some of the more detail around the social distancing plans and guidelines we've been putting together. So as you can see here, this is a sample of a floor plan that I thought was a good graphic to show, not all floor plans are created equal, right? So this floor plan shows you there's different types of areas. We have open collaboration areas, training rooms. We have areas that are benching or 6x6, 6x8. So you can see the social distancing floor plans that we have been putting together have been taking the CDC guidelines here in the U.S. Of the 6 foot or 7'6", whatever kind of your organization feels is the right interpretation, and putting those circles onto a floor plan. So you can see some of your benching areas, you cannot use every seat and follow those guidelines, the CDC guidelines. But in 6x8 or 8x8 seating, you may be able to allow people to come back to those seats. And we're also then showing the different possible social distancing breaches, right? And high traffic areas, we're trying to identify those early to set up protocols for, what to do at the restroom areas, what to do at the elevator lobbies, so that any kind of areas that, could result in some congestion are addressed before people re-enter the space. And, on the right, you see the table. So we've done this for a lot of our clients. And like I said, every floor plan is created a little differently, but you can see this floor summary. We started with 163 workstations, which are all the workstations together. But with the revised social distancing plan, you ended up with only 102 usable workstations. And you can see how that changes your metric of RSF per seat from 196 RSF per seat to 313 RSF per seat. And again, this is, we're moving in the opposite direction of what we were typically doing, which was trying to create better density metrics and lower that RSF per seat. And based on about 50% of our clients who have already created these social distancing floor plans, the average is they're losing about 50% of their seats. But again, like I said, not all spaces are created equal. So that's why these social distancing plans are so important, so that you can outline what that looks like for your specific space. So now, once you've created your social distancing plans, you can then help your organization also come up with a methodology around creating a rotational schedule. Who comes into the office? There's been lots of debates on how to do this. So the main 3 methodologies that we have been seeing are listed here. The first 2, A and B, are really for spaces that have assigned seating. Methodology A is assigning the rotational planning based on an employee, and methodology B is assigning the rotation based on the seat. And the third concept really is kind of a design for mobility spaces or neighborhoods where there is no assigned seating. So as you can see in this diagram, what we've been able to do is you can overlay your social distancing floor plans with your rotational schedules to understand who and when and how people can come back into the office. So we've made it kind of automated so that, it's not such a heavy lift for the organization. And then just to take a little deeper dive into the pros and cons of each, what we saw at the beginning is that, lots of organizations were applying methodology A, which was just take your group of employees and say, okay, we're going to bring in, if it's 10%, 20%, whatever that percentage may be, and then assigning those people to an A, B, or 1-2 schedule for the rotational entry. The problem with that, the pro of that is that obviously you are able to look at your current teams and make sure that you are bringing the right people into the office, so that people that may need to work together are on that same rotational group. The con of this, though, is that if you do this in an assigned environment, you may have two people sitting next to each other, that don't follow the social distancing protocols and boundaries, which then results in occupancy clusters, and then you having to actually move people around, which I don't think, lots of folks don't want to do at this point. The rotational group assigned to a seat, which is option B, is what we're seeing to be the most popular. It is really outlining how the space can be used based on the social distancing plans, and then assigning the employees on those plans to different rotational schedules so that they're, following the protocols and boundaries. The con of this is that you may not have the right people in the office that you want to be working together. So again, both have their pros and cons. B, I think, is just a little bit less disruptive to folks in the office and not having them need to move. The third methodology for mobility, employees are assigned to a rotational group, which you have all the pros of, methodology A, but then we also assign the seats that can be used, and they're allowed to, work out of the seats that can be used out of that neighborhood or that, mobility area. The con of this is that, obviously personal items need to be moved or taken home. You need to have a very controlled environment, clean desk policy. And really, this might cause additional stress on the employee if the employee, is not confident that the workstation that, they're using today was cleaned well overnight and they don't know who was using it the previous day. So this one, might cause a little more stress. So with that, you can see there's so many different pieces to reactivating your space. I touched a little bit on, having the protocols and guidelines set in place. You also need to make sure you understand any kind of tenant risk profile assessment in your buildings, understand what your actual buildings are doing for all the tenants inside the building. I mentioned the journey mapping of an employee so they can really come to work and understand what their day might look like and, prepare themselves for that, as well as the social distancing, rotational scheduling, supporting the remote home-based workers, attendance monitoring, and seat reservation. And always throughout all those areas, a very well thought through communication and change management plan needs to be in place so that employees feel that they're being communicated into in a good way and they understand what day one looks like. And a reentry program management is so important to keeping all of these different components on the same track and making sure that all of these things are coming together into one cohesive plan for your employees. So with that, I am going to open up the next poll. So which of the following are most important to you now? And you can pick up to 3. So some of the results are coming in.
Susan, it's Peter again. It's interesting to see a pretty diverse, spread between the various options. And again, we would emphasize that we are seeing client strategies evolve over time. And I think the listing here, Susan, is representative, and with David, as to that diversity of responses.
Absolutely. So I think what's interesting is, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it really just highlights also just the multiple strategies needed for such a complex issue.
And highlights the importance of the reentry program management. You can see those numbers going up as well. So let me know when you're ready to share.
With more options, it takes a little longer for the survey results to come in, but I think we're getting close to them.
I know. They just keep coming in, so I don't want to stop it yet. So, okay, I think we're pretty much good. We have a really good response. So here you can see, some of the typical responses we're seeing is, the workplace guidelines and policies, so important, as well as the social distancing and floor plans, which, we kind of talked about. But you can also see at the bottom, communication and reentry program is really starting to take form. I think when we first started the reentry, we were really focused on a lot of these different areas of what we're doing to get into the space immediately, which, come with your guidelines, your floor plans, and all of that. But as this whole reentry grows and becomes more complex, I think the focus will shift to the communication, the change management, and that reentry program management.
Great.
With that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Peter, to talk about that program.
Thank you so much, Susan. So we've got just a couple more slides here we'll conclude with for our session today, and we'd like to focus on this reentry program management offering that was highlighted in the survey. As Susan outlined in that gray hexagon that's shown on the screen, the reentry planning and activation activities are very key right now, but we're beginning to move into a program management phase with many of our clients. And as JLL, we have over 500 major corporate solutions clients across our 5 billion square feet of corporate real estate and commercial real estate that we oversee. And as clients look at reentry, as they look at reactivation, as they look at workforce migration, we're seeing a number of clients looking for program management in terms of managing the overall workforce migration, the reentry planning, the reactivation, all of the change management, all of the reporting as an integrated program. And we as JLL, with our corporate solutions and products and markets and consulting teams, have orchestrated this as an integrated offering. And if we look at the hexagon diagram that you see on the screen, we offer change management and communications at the lower left in terms of helping the workforce adapt to the new reentry and reactivation program and workplace environment. We also look at performance management in terms of how that program is performing, how teams are performing, and how we can report to executive management on the performance of the overall reentry and reactivation program. We also do a great deal of work, as Susan described, in site readiness planning and the orchestration of that planning from a facilities perspective, from a workplace perspective, and then we offer overall solution implementation, including task coordination, tracking, and financial management, which is so key today for a number of our major clients. In our final slide today, we'd like to offer a glimpse into the future. So as Susan and David shared all the great work that has been done in the area of reentry and reactivation, we're also beginning to embark on the reimagination and the reimagining of the corporate real estate portfolios. And with Susan and our teams, we are looking at enterprise alignment as a key element to really rethink the future. How will we work in 2024? How will we work in 2022? What is the reentry reactivation journey over the next 6 months or 18 months? How do we align all of that to the enterprise risk management to ensure health and safety of our employees? How do we reimagine the enterprise of the future, which we're doing a great deal of work with at the moment with our research teams? On the right of this slide, we have the operating principles. First and foremost will be employee health, wellness, and employee safety. There is no one-size-fits-all approach, so the opportunity for tailoring of our reimagination and reentry and reactivation program efforts are very key. And then the financial objectives, and how do we integrate and provide those financial metrics and potentially cost reduction. But we are looking at portfolio reimagination at the rate of 10 to 30% cost reduction over current run rate occupancy costs. On the lower part of the slide, we have representative elements, including business strategy alignment, financial cost management, engaging with senior leaders in the businesses and at the C-suite. We have a number of C-suite clients right now who are heavily engaged in terms of reimagination and all of the various elements that Susan described. Very key and important point about communications and change, and then the future of the workforce and the future of portfolio optimization and portfolio integration, and then finally the workplace planning and these work from home strategies. We are finding that work from home, including flex and co-working, are being considered for a number of our global clients at scale. And as we look post-COVID into 2021, 22, 24, and 2025, we will see a very interesting distributed workplace network ecosystem evolve with some very new and opportunistic opportunities for clients to reimagine their enterprise, to reimagine their workforce, to reimagine their workplace, and to reimagine their portfolio of the future. So with that, Christine, Elliott, I'd like to turn it over to you, and we can engage in some question and answer that has come in during the course of the webinar. Christine, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Peter. And yes, we do have quite a few questions that have come through, but please feel free to add yours to the list, and we will see how many we can get through. So the first question, Susan, I think this would be a good one for you. Over time, do you see the office becoming less focused on desk-based work and more so on collaboration space?
Absolutely. And I've been a kind of a mobile worker for probably since 2007. So I truly feel that people come into the office to collaborate, see each other, have meetings, get a war room and solve a problem together. You don't have to go into the office to sit at your desk. And I think this pilot has proved that, because some of the productivity scores that we've gotten is that people are just as productive, and some are even more productive working from home some level of time. So I don't think the answer is work from home full time for everyone. I think people want to collaborate with each other. That's where the magic happens, and the innovation happens. I absolutely think, though, in this reimagine, as Peter described it, organizations are going to have a chance to say, okay, we know the work from home works. We know some of our employees actually like to do this. How do we reimagine our space to really drive what people need to come into the office for and want and crave to come into the office for? And that's that collaboration. So absolutely, it might take a little time, but I think this has kind of fast forwarded a little bit of, really redesigning the office for that high collaboration.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Another one that's come in several different forms, and it's a pretty broad-ranging one. What's the biggest challenge that you see companies having with reentry overall? Who'd like to start there?
Susan, would you like to start? Peter, and I'll
Sure.
build from you.
Sure. Some of the biggest challenges, you saw me present, how to social distance, how to, nothing is foolproof, right? We are just trying to lower the risk of our employees. I think that's a big challenge. I think some of the answers that I can't give right now is, the elevator, getting up into a high-rise building. What is going to be protocol for going up into the elevator? Maybe some challenges around public transportation. Are folks going to feel safe as they're taking public transportation into their offices? And, employees, I think the biggest challenge is also the anxiety of the employee coming into the office, right? How do we help manage that and, make them feel better about coming in? I think those are the biggest challenges that I'm seeing. So Peter, you can add.
Yes, Susan, thank you. I will build upon those great responses and challenges. I think, one of the greatest challenges of COVID-19 is the uncertainty and the evolution of the virus itself. And so we are reopening in many places in the U.S. and Europe and EMEA, and APAC has certainly reopened, but the virus continues. And so from a C-suite, CEO, chief human resource, chief legal officer perspective, it's very challenging these days for executive management to have very firm decisions around some of these reentry strategies and protocols. And I'll give a couple of examples where we've had clients who had very clear percentages defined for reentry in May, and then it was June, and those percentages of the reentry population have now changed, and the dates have changed. And so it's a smaller population that will be reentering now in September or October, and the dates have changed, and the number in terms of the essential workers that have been identified either as voluntary workers or essential workers to the organization, there's been variability in terms of that employee headcount. So I think the challenge today for the C-suite and for business leadership is quite significant. as we navigate, reentry and reactivation, as Susan described, we're trying to help our clients navigate through with various scenario models and to allow this to be evolutionary and flexible. And in that, it's requiring, daily client engagement with our very large teams across JLL to ensure that we're helping those clients make the right decisions, ensuring the employee health, safety, and well-being, and addressing all of the various important protocols around reactivation that Susan shared in her tremendous study of the over 150 million square feet that we've already reactivated and planned. So it's a complex issue. I'll just add, Christine and Susan and to the audience, we may see an elongated COVID journey in the U.S. as an example. So we may be in reentry and reactivation for 6 months, 18 months, potentially 2 years. And with a number of clients, we are looking out to 2024, 2025, and what is that longer term, future state, and how can we orchestrate a very productive COVID journey and navigate that journey successfully over time. And therein lies, I think, a societal challenge and certainly an organizational challenge that we as JLL are stepping up to support and partner with our client organizations.
Fantastic, Peter. Thank you. Such great insights there. We're going to turn to, there's quite a few questions coming in on a little bit more practical level related to rotational scheduling. So I'm going to ask 2 questions on this. The first is, a company is considering 2 different plans in terms of setting up their rotational scheduling. The first would be alternating teams Monday and Wednesday and Tuesday and Thursday. So one group on Monday, Wednesday, one group Tuesday, Thursday, or doing it by half days and bringing in a set of people in the morning and a set of people in the afternoon. What do you recommend in terms of that?
So this is Susan. I'll start, but I also have one of my colleagues on the phone, Ali Fernandez, who's done so many of these for clients. So I'm going to have her add. First of all, we thought that too, right? I personally thought, oh yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Thursday. But when we did more research, the virus actually lives on, hard surfaces for up to 3 days. So, I know we're establishing very stringent cleaning schedules, but what we've actually seen people do is rotate weeks so that, every weekend it could be deep cleaned and then people are coming in staggered through the week, but having that whole week difference in different people coming into the office. Definitely not the morning and afternoon, but I'm going to let Ali cover a little bit of that, of what she's seeing in some other different spaces.
Thanks, Susan. Yes, as Susan mentioned, it is pretty much a week-to-week rotation cadence, but for labs, we are seeing a 4-hour daily cadence change. The reason for that is many employees need access to lab equipment in order to advance their work and then document that work that's being conducted in that same day. So that is typically where we are seeing a more increased cadence. For the most part, all other industries, we are seeing that week to week, as Susan mentioned.
Great. And related, for teams who are already occupying their space, their offices at less than 50% of maximum density with social distancing, would you still recommend a rotation schedule on that?
So I think the answer is yes, because 50% to me seems like a pretty high percentage. So when we polled folks to find out what percentage of folks they will be bringing in, it seems that, organizations are taking a very conservative approach to say, let's bring in 10% first and then up it to 15%, and then they're monitoring it. So I would still, if you're planning on doing 50%, I would still do some rotational planning just to make sure that you are not seeing any kind of uptick in cases, or making sure that your employees also feel safe. Because the 50% will also create some bottlenecks in, the restrooms, the elevator lobbies, the more collaboration areas, also trying to get into the buildings. Peter, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I would concur, Susan. That makes very good sense.
additional item, item that I would add to that is we are hearing from clients the concern around teams being affected by a COVID incident. And so that is also why they're adding as that extra layer of protection of rotation planning to ensure that should an employee be exposed to COVID and bring that into the office, they are potentially not exposing or at least reducing the exposure risk to an entire team.
A great point, Allie.
Interesting. Good stuff. All right, switching gears a little bit. This one's interesting. Are other companies finding the biggest hurdle to re-entering the workplace is more about getting to and from the office? Our employees feel unsafe using mass transit and are much less concerned about the office. I think it brings up the interesting point about helping people feel safe. So, Peter, do you want to share some thoughts on that?
Yes, certainly, Christine, and then, Susan, please feel free to add. So in the major city centers such as New York, Chicago, San Francisco, London, Tokyo, there's a great deal of concern about commuting and commutation risk. And I'll use New York as an example since I'm based here in New York. We see a number of clients who are not as concerned relative to the in-office workplace contagion risk, but very concerned about the commutation, mass transit, contagion risk to their employees. And as a result, a number of large client organizations here in the New York area are looking at suburban office satellite locations, whereby for a period of time, their employees may be able to drive to those office locations, or in some cases with our tech clients in San Francisco, they're actually looking at car service, Uber type capabilities, transit capabilities to help those employees come to those suburban satellite locations by car versus mass transit. And that is being viewed as a potential interim transit solution, given the potential risk, which is yet to be fully, determined on mass transit for the longer term. And I will share, the experience that we had here in New York post 9/11 after a major terrorist attack, which was quite horrific. There was a great deal of fear in the following, year to 18 months post 9/11. And over time, those fears subsided in terms of even, occupying very high floors and very tall buildings in New York City. So our sense is right now from the employee sentiment surveys that we've taken, there is a great deal of anxiety and fear. And from our work with Gallup and from other sources, we know that 7 out of 10 employees are concerned about their reentry to the workplace and to the office. And so I think we'll see some organizations, as we're seeing here in New York and in San Francisco and in London and other geographies, sort of rethink their regional footprints in terms of those regional portfolios, deploy potentially rotational workforce migration, workplace mobility offerings, and hybrid solutions, where there might be a work-at-home solution for 2 days of the week, 2 days a week going to a satellite suburban location by car. And we're finding that organizations are seeking those alternatives out to help their employees become more comfortable with the return to the office and to offer those suburban satellite, alternative to mass transit solutions as an opportunity to bring confidence actually to those employees about returning back to the office and back to work. So Susan, if you'd like to add to that from what you're saying, but I think this is a major issue, and we as JLL are helping our clients navigate this issue on a number of fronts.
No, I think you covered it perfectly, Peter. Thank you.
Great.
And Peter, I would just add that.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add that it also just gets down to just a requirement of organizations really knowing their employees well and taking the time to really understand their commuting patterns, their behaviors, and trying to optimize the best community, especially across cities, as you mentioned, just so many differences, and kind of just navigating through all those is just crucial. And so we've had a lot of clients reach out really trying to focus on the commuting questions, especially as of late, as people are talking about reentry, but to get to the office, the commute is pretty important.
Yeah, if I can
Great.
just add one comment, David, to that, and I think we're going to see new levels of employee engagement. And I think the chief human resource officers today that we're dealing with and the C-suite is very concerned and highly engaged with employee sentiment, David, to your good commentary there. So as we move forward, we will be looking at episodic employee sentiment surveying. And I know Christine, Susan, and team, David, we're doing a lot of that within JLL across our 90,000 employees. And I think you're going to see more employee sentiment and surveying to ensure that sentiment is aligned to the various executive decisions and organizational strategies and reentry and reactivation program efforts that are being decided upon and then acted upon and then perhaps modified. And I think, Christine and team, that's another very interesting part of the COVID evolution is that we may have to modify some of our strategies and programmatic decisions over time. And in that will require tremendous organizational flexibility as well as, workplace flexibility to perhaps, make these changes over time as the virus evolves and as these programs evolve. So with that, Christine, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. All great points. I think we have time for one more question, and it's come in a number of different ways. So I'm going to kind of paraphrase a couple of them together. So this was a great recap and great insights on some of the short-term practical strategies for reentry and specifically the reactivation of space. Thinking ahead, though, this as traumatic as this all is for everyone, this will likely not last forever. So what do you see companies doing in terms of simultaneously planning these complicated reentries along with trying to think through what's going to be happening longer term once we get past this crisis? So thoughts on that, Peter?
Sure, I'll be glad to address that, and then perhaps Susan and David have additional thoughts. So from the just released report this morning by the Business Continuity Institute, that organization surveyed several thousand executives globally, and what was one of the most compelling findings from their survey is that less than 25% of Fortune 1000 organizations will return to their formal business models pre-COVID. And so what that says to us as JLL is that we're going to see tremendous business model transformation over the next 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, and we will see new workforce strategies. We will see the acceleration of digital transformation and new innovative technologies and business process automation come into the enterprise. And as a result, we're viewing COVID-19 as an accelerant for real estate portfolio optimization and workplace transformation. So as Susan pointed out and David pointed out from our survey results, we will see in the future an opportunity to reimagine and rethink the future real estate portfolio and the future workplace. And it may necessitate, in some cases, additional space, per Susan's good example, that we're moving from 150 to 200 square feet per seat up to 300 or 400 square feet per seat with social distancing. So it may necessitate some additional space to be taken in suburban locations or other locations, but it'll offer also the opportunity to optimize underutilized portfolio and underutilized workplace environments. And so our view, I think, Christine, in response to this good question, is that all organizations should start thinking now not only about their reentry in the latter part of 2020, but how do they reimagine their future workforce, their future workplace, their future portfolio, their future health and well-being initiatives for their employees for the longer term. And so as we look at 2020, 21, 2022, and beyond to 24 and 25, it's a tremendous opportunity to rethink our business models, to rethink our real estate portfolios, to rethink how we work and how we engage and how do we ensure the health, safety, and human performance of our employees for the benefit of our organizations and for the benefit of society overall. So I know that's a rather lengthy answer, but I'll let Susan or David provide any additional context.
No, I think you covered it perfectly. And just to add to that, I don't see people changing the way their space looks today because of COVID, but they are accelerating that reimagine, just like Peter talked about. So I think it'll be interesting to see what that looks like in the future. But they're definitely not, building 8x8 workstations everywhere in replacement of their benching. They're just changing the way they use their space today. And they're starting to think about that reimagine of what does that future look like, so that if there are additional pandemics or other things we have to respond to, they are ready with their space.
Excellent. Thank you so much. On that note, we are going to conclude today's webinar. If you would like to reach out and connect with one of our experts, you can send an email to workplacecontinuity@jll.com. And early next week, given the Memorial Day holiday, we will be sending out a follow-up to the webinar, which will include the recording along with access to the overall occupancy benchmarking guide for this year, including the detailed results on our COVID research that you heard about today. So once again, thank you so much. And have a safe and healthy day.